The lunchtime rush was hitting its peak at the downtown branch of the Coffee Bean Emporium. Steam hissed from the espresso machine, phones pinged with mobile orders, and the low hum of chatter filled the air. Amidst the controlled chaos, Jake Reynolds, the young store manager, stood with his arms crossed, sharp eyes fixed on the newest member of his team, a woman diligently wiping down a table, perhaps a little slower than the younger staff, her brown hair showing noticeable streaks of silver at the temples. He strode over, his polished shoes clicking impatiently on the tile floor. "Hey, new girl!" he barked, his voice cutting through the din. The woman looked up, her expression mild, maybe a little tired. "What is taking so long? That table should have been cleared 5 minutes ago. Are you always this slow?" The woman, who wore a name tag identifying her as Emily, murmured an apology. "Sorry, Mr. Reynolds. I was just making sure it was thoroughly clean." Jake scoffed, rolling his eyes dramatically. "Thoroughly clean? We need fast, not perfect. This is not some leisurely housekeeping job. If you cannot keep up with the pace here..." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper that was still audible over the noise. "Then maybe you should just get out. We do not have time for dead weight." Emily lowered her gaze, her hands tightening on the damp cleaning cloth. She nodded meekly, turning back to her task without another word. But behind the facade of quiet submission, behind the eyes that seemed to accept the reprimand, a different thought flickered. A spark of assessment, sharp and analytical. Because Emily was not just another middle-aged woman trying to make ends meet. She was Emma Carter, the 45-year-old founder and CEO of the entire Coffee Bean Emporium chain, and Jake Reynolds had absolutely no idea who he was talking to. Emma had built her company from a single shop into a national brand based on quality coffee and, crucially, quality service grounded in respect for customers and respect for employees. Lately, however, anonymous emails had trickled into corporate headquarters, hinting at issues in specific branches, vague complaints about management attitude, unusually high turnover rates among older staff members. Nothing concrete enough for formal action, but enough to trouble Emma. She believed in seeing things for herself. So, shedding her power suits for a standard issue apron and comfortable shoes, and adopting the persona of Emily, a recent hire needing work, she had decided to spend a week undercover at the branch most frequently mentioned in the whispers, this one managed by the ambitious young Jake Reynolds. Observing from the sidelines earlier, Emma had already noticed Jake's dismissive tone towards Linda Thompson, a kind-faced woman in her early 60s who handled the pastry counter with quiet efficiency despite Jake's constant hovering and critical remarks. Linda seemed perpetually stressed, her shoulders hunched whenever Jake was near. Now, Emma was getting a taste of his management style firsthand. Later that afternoon, during a brief lull, Jake approached Emma again. He did not ask, he ordered. "Emily, the customer restrooms need a deep clean, both of them, and make sure you scrub the grout." He gestured dismissively towards the back hallway. Cleaning the restrooms was usually handled by the closing shift or a dedicated maintenance person in busier locations, not a barista during peak hours. It felt like a deliberate attempt to assign the least desirable task. Emma simply nodded. "Okay, Mr. Reynolds." As she gathered the cleaning supplies, she heard him mutter to one of the younger baristas, loud enough for her to overhear. "Got to keep the new hires busy, especially ones like her. Make sure they know their place." The accompanying smirk was unmistakable. Emma spent the next hour scrubbing toilets and mopping floors, her mind racing. This was worse than she had imagined. The blatant disrespect, the deliberate assignment of menial tasks outside her supposed role, the thinly veiled ageism. It was appalling. This was not the culture she had worked so hard to build. As she wiped down the mirror in the women's restroom, she caught her own reflection. The slightly disguised appearance, the standard uniform. Then she thought of Jake's arrogant posture, his condescending tone. A cold resolve settled over her. He had no idea the hornet's nest he was poking. She finished her task, returned the supplies, and resumed wiping tables, her movements deliberate. Jake shot her another critical glance as he headed towards his small office. Emma met his gaze briefly, then looked away, but her inner voice was sharp and clear. "Just you wait, Mr. Reynolds, just wait until you find out who I really am." The game, she realized, had truly begun. The next few days settled into a grueling pattern for Emma, working under the guise of Emily. Jake Reynolds seemed to make it his personal mission to make her shifts as unpleasant as possible. The restroom cleaning incident was not isolated. He repeatedly assigned her the most physically demanding or least desirable tasks, hauling heavy bags of coffee beans from the storeroom, cleaning the greasy filters from the vents, even scrubbing the dumpster area behind the store, jobs typically rotated among staff or handled by specific personnel. He monitored her constantly, quick to criticize any perceived slowness or minor imperfection. One afternoon, a customer complained that their latte was not hot enough. Though another barista had made the drink, Jake immediately turned on Emma, who was working the register nearby. "Emily, did you see this order?" he demanded loudly, ensuring other customers could hear. "Are you paying attention at all? Now we have an unhappy customer because you are probably daydreaming." He shoved the lukewarm latte towards her. "Remake it properly this time." The implication was clear. Any problem, regardless of its origin, was somehow her fault. The public humiliation stung, but it was the private comments, delivered with a sneer when he thought no one else was listening, that truly fueled Emma's resolve. While she was struggling to lift a heavy box of syrups, he walked past and muttered, "Putting your back into it, huh? Surprised an old woman like you is still doing this kind of work. Is not it a little pathetic?" He chuckled darkly and walked away, leaving Emma fuming silently. The cruelty was calculated, designed to undermine and demean. But as difficult as her own experience was, Emma quickly realized it paled in comparison to the way Jake treated Linda Thompson. He was relentless with the older woman. He nitpicked every pastry she arranged, criticized her friendly interactions with regular customers as wasting time, and frequently excluded her from brief team huddles where he'd give quick updates or instructions, only to reprimand her later for not knowing what was discussed. Emma saw Linda's cheerful demeanor gradually fade throughout each shift, replaced by a weary anxiety. During a shared break, Emma cautiously struck up a conversation with Linda in the small, cramped staff room. "Mr. Reynolds seems pretty demanding," Emma ventured carefully. Linda sighed, stirring her cup of tea, her eyes downcast. "Oh, honey, you have no idea. He has his favorites, you know, the young ones." She hesitated, then leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You be careful. He does not seem to like, well, people our age very much. Marianne, she worked here for 5 years, wonderful lady, always reliable. He made things so difficult for her. She finally quit last month, said she couldn't take the stress anymore. And before her, there was Robert at the roaster, and Janice, who did mornings, all good workers, all over 50, all gone within the last 6 months since Mr. Reynolds took over. 3 experienced employees driven out simply because of their age. A clear, disturbing pattern emerged. Jake was not just a bully. He was systematically purging older staff members, likely replacing them with younger, perhaps less experienced and lower-paid workers, or simply pocketing the wage savings through manipulated scheduling. Emma's objective had shifted from simply observing service quality to uncovering potentially illegal and deeply unethical behavior by one of her managers. The situation escalated further towards the end of the week. Jake seemed particularly irritable, snapping at everyone, but reserving his sharpest barbs for Emma and Linda. He had apparently miscalculated the inventory order, resulting in a shortage of a popular coffee blend. Instead of taking responsibility, he publicly blamed the general incompetence of his staff. his glare lingering pointedly on the two older women. Later, while Emma was restocking cups near the service counter, she overheard Jake talking to one of the younger baristas, clearly intending for her to hear. "Honestly, these slow old folks are just a drag on efficiency," he scoffed, loud enough to carry. "They cost the store money. They cannot keep up. Makes my bonus numbers look bad," he chuckled humorlessly. "But do not worry, I have ways of dealing with dead weight. Just you wait. I will get rid of her soon enough, just like the others." His gaze flicked towards Emma, cold and menacing. At that moment, Emma's eyes drifted upwards, catching the familiar dark dome of a security camera mounted on the ceiling, its tiny red light indicating it was active. It covered the main service area, including where Jake often stood when making his pronouncements, and likely captured audio as well. An idea began to form, sharp and decisive in her mind. His arrogance, his blatant disregard for company policy and basic human decency might just be his undoing. The camera held the key. "Keep talking, Jake," she thought, a grim determination hardening her features. "Keep talking." It is truly disheartening to think about people facing unfair treatment or discrimination just because of their age or any other factor at their workplace. It happens more often than we might like to admit. Have you ever witnessed or experienced something similar? A boss who played favorites or maybe felt sidelined because you did not fit a certain mold? Sharing your story in the comments below can be really powerful, helping others know they are not alone in these struggles. And if you are finding Emma's undercover mission compelling and want to see how she turns the tables, please give this video a like and hit that subscribe button so you do not miss the next chapter. Emma knew Jake's abusive behavior and discriminatory actions were grounds for dismissal, but his casual remark about his bonus numbers looking bad sparked a deeper suspicion. Driving out experienced staff might save some payroll costs, but could there be more to it? Why was he so focused on his personal bonus? With her undercover week nearing its end, Emma decided to use her remaining shifts to observe Jake's operational habits more closely, particularly around closing time and cash handling. Pretending to be slower at her closing tasks, wiping down machines, restocking supplies, Emma kept a discreet eye on Jake as he reconciled the day's earnings in his small office. The door was usually slightly ajar. She noticed a pattern. He seemed particularly attentive when handling cash transactions versus credit card slips. On 2 separate occasions, she saw him linger over the point-of-sale system after processing a cash payment, his fingers tapping quickly on the screen. Later, when taking out the trash, she noticed crumpled receipts in the bin near his office door, receipts that looked suspiciously like voided cash sales. Her CEO mind immediately connected the dots. If he was voiding cash transactions after the customer left, the sale would disappear from the official record. He could then pocket the cash, making the store's revenue appear slightly lower on paper, but crucially making the profit margin seem higher because the cost of goods sold, the coffee, milk, etc., was still accounted for, while the corresponding revenue vanished. Higher profit margins often translated directly into bigger management bonuses. He was not just a bully, he was likely stealing from the company. The next evening, armed with this hypothesis, Emma employed a risky tactic. Using a small, easily concealable recording device activated on her phone, tucked into her apron pocket, she approached Jake's office door near closing time, feigning confusion about a cleaning procedure. As she stood there, asking her question, she saw him quickly stuff a wad of cash from the register drawer into his pocket before turning to answer her. The angle might not have been perfect for video, but the distinct sound of rustling bills was hopefully captured. Later, feigning needing help with the inventory count sheet near the POS terminal he primarily used, she managed to position herself to subtly record him voiding 2 cash sales back to back, muttering something under his breath about adjusting for waste, when it was not a smoking gun confession, but it was compelling circumstantial evidence, especially when combined with the discrepancies she suspected she would find in the official audits. That night, driving home from her shift, Emma felt a heavy mix of anger and sadness. Anger at Jake's brazen theft and manipulation, but also a profound sadness for Linda and the others who had suffered under his management. She pictured Linda's face, the way she absorbed Jake's insults with quiet resignation, likely needing the job too much to risk speaking out. She thought of the older employees who had been forced out, their experience and loyalty discarded. Sitting in her car outside her real home, a world away from the cramped staff room and sticky floors of the cafe, Emma looked at the small recording device on the passenger seat. This was no longer just about verifying service standards or addressing vague complaints. It was about rooting out corruption and standing up for vulnerable employees who lacked the power to defend themselves. Her resolve hardened into steely determination.
"I am not just doing this for myself," she vowed silently, her gaze fixed on the distant city lights. "I am doing this for Linda, for Mary Ann, Robert, and Janice. For everyone who has ever been made to feel small or disposable because of their age or circumstance." The mission had become deeply personal, yet simultaneously much larger than her own experience.
She picked up her personal phone, the one Jake Reynolds had no idea existed. Scrolling through her contacts, she found the group chat for her executive leadership team, her chief operating officer, head of human resources, and chief financial officer. She typed a brief, concise message. "Urgent, mandatory meeting. My office, 9 a.m. sharp tomorrow. Please clear your schedules. I have obtained critical information regarding branch operations that requires immediate attention. I will be presenting findings from my recent field research. Expect a significant surprise." She hit send, the message flying instantly across the digital ether, setting in motion the events that would bring Jake Reynolds' reign of tyranny and deceit crashing down. The stage was set. Tomorrow morning, the curtain would rise on the final act. The next morning, the atmosphere in the executive conference room on the top floor of the Coffee Bean Emporium headquarters was charged with anticipation. Emma's cryptic message had sent ripples of speculation through her leadership team. They sat around the polished mahogany table, the COO, CFO, head of HR, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. Precisely at 9 a.m., the door opened and Jake Reynolds walked in. He had been summoned unexpectedly, told only that the regional performance, including his branch, would be discussed. He wore his best suit, a confident, almost smug expression on his face, clearly expecting praise for his manipulated profit margins. He nodded a greeting to the executives, taking a seat near the head of the table, seemingly unfazed by the high-level audience. A moment later, the door opened again and Emily entered, carrying a tray with a coffee carafe and cups. She moved quietly, unobtrusively, pouring coffee for the executives. Jake barely glanced at her, accepting his cup with a grunt, already focused on the presentation screen. Emma placed the tray on a side table. Then, instead of leaving, she stood quietly near the wall, her apron still tied neatly around her waist. The COO cleared his throat, ready to begin, but Emma stepped forward. "Before we begin the official agenda," she said, her voice calm but carrying an unexpected authority that made everyone pause, "there is a more pressing matter concerning branch operations and management conduct that I need to address personally." All eyes turned to her. The executives looked confused. Jake frowned, annoyed by the interruption from the hired help. "Emily, maybe you should wait outside," he snapped, waving a dismissive hand. Emma ignored him. She reached up and slowly, deliberately untied her apron, folding it neatly and placing it on the side table. She straightened her posture, and the tired meekness seemed to melt away, replaced by the quiet confidence of command. She met Jake's impatient glare directly. "Actually, Mr. Reynolds," she said, her voice losing the slight hesitancy she had affected all week, becoming crisp and clear, "my name is not Emily. It is Emma Carter, she paused, letting the name hang in the suddenly silent room. I am the founder and CEO of Coffee Bean Emporium. The reactions were instantaneous and dramatic. The executives stared, mouths slightly agape, processing the shock. Jake Reynolds froze, his confident smirk vanishing as if wiped clean. His face went slack, then flushed a deep red, then drained completely of color, leaving him looking pale and suddenly ill. He blinked rapidly, staring at Emma as if seeing a ghost. What? No. You are the coffee lady, he stammered, his voice barely a croak. For the past week, yes, Emma confirmed, her gaze unwavering. I have been working undercover at your branch to observe operations firsthand after receiving some disturbing, albeit anonymous, reports. She gestured towards the large screen at the end of the room, and what I observed was far worse than the reports suggested. She nodded to her CFO, who discreetly tapped a command on a tablet. An audio file began to play, filling the stunned silence of the room. It was Jake's voice, sharp and cruel, berating Emily for being too slow. Then another clip, his mocking words about old women being pathetic. Another, his dismissive comments about Linda Thompson. And finally, the muffled sounds recorded near his office, the distinct rustle of cash being pocketed, followed by his muttered justification for voiding sales at the POS terminal. As the audio clips played, Jake sank lower in his chair, his face contorting with panic. That is taken out of context, he sputtered, looking wildly around the table for support, but finding only stony expressions from the executives. She is twisting things. She provoked me. Emma remained calm. Is that also why you felt the need to systematically drive out 3 experienced employees over the age of 50 within 6 months of your arrival, Mr. Reynolds? Was that out of context, too? She then signaled her CFO again. A spreadsheet appeared on the screen, showing the preliminary results of an overnight analysis comparing his branch's reported sales data against the central inventory system and cash logs. The discrepancies were glaring, pointing directly towards the voided cash transactions and inflated profit margins. Or perhaps this financial context is more illuminating. Jake stared at the numbers, the irrefutable evidence of his theft laid bare. The last vestiges of his arrogance crumbled. He put his head in his hands, muttering, No, this cannot be happening. He looked utterly broken, cornered. Emma let the weight of the evidence settle in the room for a moment. Then she turned her attention to her stunned leadership team. Her voice was firm, decisive, leaving no room for ambiguity. Let me be perfectly clear, she stated, her gaze sweeping across her executives. This kind of behavior, the bullying, the blatant age discrimination, the theft, is absolutely unacceptable in this company. It violates everything Coffee Bean Emporium stands for. She took a deep breath. Effective immediately, we are implementing a strict, zero-tolerance policy regarding any form of discrimination or harassment, with a particular focus on ageism, given what I have witnessed. Any manager, any employee found engaging in such behavior or fostering a hostile work environment for any team member will face immediate termination. No exceptions, no second chances for this kind of abuse of power and trust. She looked pointedly at Jake, who refused to meet her eyes, still slumped in his chair. And furthermore, any manipulation of financial records for personal gain will be met with the full consequences allowed by law and company policy, including prosecution. The room was silent, absorbing the gravity of her declaration. The surprise Emma had promised was a bombshell, and its shockwaves were only just beginning to spread. She had not only uncovered serious misconduct, but had decisively set a new, uncompromising standard for the entire company, right then and there. The fate of Jake Reynolds seemed sealed, hanging heavy in the charged air of the conference room. The silence in the conference room stretched, thick with the implications of Emma's pronouncements and Jake's exposure. Emma turned to her head of human resources. "Helen," she said, her voice leaving no room for negotiation, "please escort Mr. Reynolds from the building immediately. His employment with Coffee Bean Emporium is terminated, effective now. Ensure his final pay is processed according to policy minus any restitution determined by the financial audit for the funds he misappropriated. And please," she added, her tone softening slightly but still firm, "I want you to personally reach out to Linda Thompson at the downtown branch today. Offer her the company's sincerest apologies for the environment she endured under Mr. Reynolds' management. Assure her that her position is secure and that we value her contribution immensely. We also need to attempt contact with Mary Ann, Robert and Janice, the employees Mr. Reynolds forced out. Let them know what has transpired and explore appropriate reconciliation, whether that is re-employment if they desire it, or a severance package that acknowledges the circumstances of their departure." As Helen nodded and stood to approach Jake, he suddenly lurched forward, his face desperate. "Mrs. Carter, please," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "I messed up. I know I did. I was stressed, the pressure. Please, give me another chance. I need this job. I have got bills, a family." Emma looked at him, not with anger anymore, but with a profound sense of disappointment. "Respect, Mr. Reynolds," she said evenly, her voice cutting through his pleas. "Respect for your colleagues, respect for the company, respect for basic human dignity. That is not a negotiable job requirement. It is the bare minimum. And you failed spectacularly." She shook her head slowly. "There are no second chances for the kind of behavior you exhibited. Helen, please proceed." Helen gently but firmly guided the now sobbing Jake Reynolds out of the room. The remaining executives watched him go, the reality of the zero-tolerance policy hitting home. Emma let out a slow breath, turning back to her team. The crisis was handled, but the work was just beginning. "All right," she said, her focus shifting immediately to the future. "This incident has exposed a serious vulnerability, not just in oversight, but in our culture. We need to do more than just punish wrongdoing. We need to proactively foster the right environment." She looked around the table, her expression resolute. "Therefore, effective immediately, we are launching a new company-wide initiative. Helen, I want you to work with operations to develop enhanced training modules for all managers on inclusive leadership, conflict resolution, and specifically recognizing and combating age bias. Furthermore," and here her voice took on a note of determined optimism, "we are establishing a mentorship program specifically designed to support our employees over 50. We will pair experienced staff members with senior leadership mentors, provide targeted skill development opportunities, and ensure clear pathways for advancement exist for everyone, regardless of their age. We need to actively invest in the valuable experience these team members bring." This was the micro twist, not just punishment, but a constructive company-wide commitment to valuing older workers. Later that day, the scene shifted back to the familiar setting of the downtown Coffee Bean Emporium branch. Helen, the head of HR, spoke privately with Linda Thompson in the small back office. She explained what had happened at headquarters, conveying Emma Carter's personal apology and the news of Jake's termination. Linda listened, her eyes widening first in disbelief, then slowly filling with tears. Not of sadness, but of profound relief, and a weight she had carried for months seemed to lift from her shoulders. She managed a watery smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." A few days later, Emma Carter visited the branch again. This time, she walked in not as Emily the trainee, but as herself the CEO. The staff buzzed with nervous energy, but Emma greeted everyone warmly. She sought out Linda, who was arranging pastries with a newfound lightness in her movements. Emma approached her quietly. "Linda," she said softly, "I wanted to apologize to you personally. for what you endured and for the fact that it took me coming here myself to uncover it.
It should never have happened.
Linda looked up, meeting Emma's eyes directly for the first time without fear. "Mrs. Carter," she said, her voice steady, "it means more than you know. Not just that he is gone, but that someone finally listened." Emma smiled warmly. "We are listening now, Linda, and the new programs I announced are just the start. We value your experience here." They spoke for a few more minutes about the mentorship initiative, Linda's face lighting up with genuine interest. As Emma finally left the branch, stepping out into the afternoon sun, she felt the burden of responsibility that came with leadership, but also a deep sense of satisfaction. Mistakes had been made, the system had failed Linda and others, but she had taken decisive steps to correct it, not just punishing the wrongdoer, but implementing changes to prevent it from happening again. "No one gets left behind," she thought, echoing her earlier resolve, "not on her watch." What happened at the Coffee Bean Emporium is a stark reminder that leadership is not just about profits and procedures. It is about people. It is about creating an environment where everyone feels safe, respected, and valued for their contributions, regardless of their age or background. Combating ageism and other forms of bias requires vigilance and a real commitment from the top down. It makes you think, doesn't it? What does true leadership look like in practice? Thank you so much for joining us for Emma Carter's story. We hope it gave you something to think about. If you believe in fair workplaces and leaders who stand up for what is right, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. We truly value your support. Let us know your thoughts on workplace discrimination and leadership responsibility in the comments below. We love hearing from you, and be sure to check out our playlist for other inspiring narratives. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you in the next story.